Greetings and good tidings. My name is Bane, and today I'd like to showcase a build that I've been playing in Curse of the Allflame, Cast While Channeling, Cyclone, Shock Nova, Queen's Hunger, Elementalist, or with Spectre and Animate Guardian friends. The reason this build exists is thanks to the Queen's Hunger chess piece, giving us some huge stats if we can maintain our offering duration for long enough. Some of the pros of this build are a relaxing one-hand Cyclone playstyle, good clear, decent single target damage, and no reliance on a mage blood. However, the cons are that it is squishy with a low max fizz hit, its modest single target damage with 10 million sustained DPS ramping up to about 20 mil. This ramp time can be annoying to deal with, and it does require a mandatory belt, body armor, and amulet anoint. Playing with offerings has two major restrictions. They only affect minions, and you can only have one active at a time. The Necromancer node, Mistress of Sacrifice, gets around the first restriction, but giving us reduced offering effect, while Leash of Ablation gets around the second. However, the Queen's Hunger gets around the first restriction in a much more interesting way. Dropping from Katrina, the boss of Betrayal, it triggers Bone, Flesh, and Spirit offerings sequentially every 5 seconds. Importantly, these offering skills can affect us and at full effect. So, if we'd like to maintain these buffs permanently, we need to get the offering duration up to 15 seconds so that it triggers again before expiry. An added problem to solve is corpses. While we leave a trail of electrocuted bodies in our wake during mapping, bosses don't generate corpses. The easiest way to get around this is by anointing Hollow Effigy for a crimson, silver, and prismatic oil, which allows our offering skills to be cast without a corpse. We could boost our offerings even further by taking the Katrina Bloodline, which gives another 50% offering effect at the cost of dying if our offering expires. However, the number of times I've died to something dumb, like running out of mana, is too high and is a very frustrating experience. I would advise against taking this node and instead grabbing more DPS or tankiness from your primary ascendancy points. To make our offerings last 15 seconds, we need to stack skill effect duration from various sources. We use an Impossible Escape Jewel to access some of the duration nodes near the Scion, pick up the duration nodes near the Witch, and have a 2120 more duration support socketed in our body armor. Because of this, we lose a link in our body armors, and thus I always recommend using a two-handed weapon with Queen's Hunger builds. This is where I had the idea to go for some kind of 6-link triggered spell setup. I picked up a Cane of Kulamak with double damage, spell damage, and +3 level of supported gems to increase our cast while channeling trigger rate. For choice of spell, I went with Lightning, as I wanted to play around with a new Roiling Tempest Keystone. Nova spells are particularly good to pair with the Cyclone cast while channeling setup, as they don't require any aiming. I went with Shock Nova, as it can also provide some big shocks on pinnacle bosses. Combined with the perfect Spirit of Fortune Spectre, we get a free Wrath Aura and Lucky Damage, which is huge for Lightning as the damage range is quite high. For my other Spectres, I went with a perfect Pain Artist for Zealotry and Crit Multi, and a Primal Demiurge for Clarity. By offloading these auras to our Spectres, we can focus more on crit and block chance, as well as generic energy shield or damage nodes. While our main damage skill needs a 6-link, Spectres and Animate Guardian are perfectly viable in a 4-link setup. With a lucky +2 minion corrupt on my Queen's Hunger, and linking Meat Shield, Empower, and Minion Life, my Spectres socketed in the chest are yet to die in any content. I initially designed this build to be a mapper, and started as an occultist with Profane Bloom, but the new aspect of Solaris, which has some really good rest shred, made me pivot into Elementalist. We are not golem stacking, however, and instead focusing on exposure effect, convergence, and shock effect, with elemental aegis for some added tankiness. Defensively, we go CI and are block capped with about 7000 energy shield. This makes the build feel much tankier in mapping than the raw max hit number suggests, but it is absolutely not a true tank. Large physical hits like the Shaper Slam are the build's main weakness. To mitigate elemental damage, I use the Trader Keystone with some Flask Charge gain nodes to have permanent uptime on Oriat's End for explosions, and a Ruby, Sapphire, and Topaz Flask. Thanks to these flasks, we are also stun immune, ailment immune with a Storm Shroud, and get some increased crit chance. We can automate them by crafting use when an adjacent flask is used, only having to press one button at the start of a map. We can increase our single target with Sigil of Power, which has a massive 30-second duration, and Val Smite, which lasts for 15 seconds. If you want to be even more extra, you can pop a Val Righteous Fire for another 15 seconds of damage, but be advised that this will chunk you down. Again, I would like to reiterate that the single target is not mind-blowing. ramping to about 20 million at max Sunscald and Sigil stacks with Val Smite and Val Righteous Fire popped. Playstyle wise, all you need to do when entering a new area is to press a flask and start spinning. This build does have a small ramp time, as we only get all 3 offerings after 15 seconds, with a notable boost in speed after Flesh offering kicks in. The single target also ramps over 5 seconds, as Aspect of Solaris applies a Sunscale debuff once every second. This is not very problematic or noticeable in mapping, but if you die in a boss encounter, it can get annoying to wait for your offerings to come back up. I would not recommend this for farming bosses, although I have cleared a few Ubers with the build. This build really shines in longer style instances like Voyages, where you spin to win across a massive map with no interruptions. Budget-wise, this build is really cheap to get off the ground. The core Queen's Hunger setup only requires the body armor, a Leash of Ablation with the skill effect Duration Corrupt, and the Hollow Effigy Anoint. My Dragon Flying with the Curse Implicit cost 11 divines, but this is absolutely not necessary. You can pick up Unholy Authority, Flesh and Flame Jewels for a few hundred chaos instead. The Spectres were also all less than 50C each at the time of recording. The Cane of Kulamak I'm using was around 1 divine, so the weapon isn't a major cost either. Luxury items like my Rational Doctrine or Elevated Mod Helmet are completely superfluous and aren't necessary for the build to function. The character I'm currently showcasing obviously has more currency sunk into it, but I think you could put together a functional version for comfortably under 10 div, particularly if you're willing to do some of the work yourself, like corrupting belts or crafting your own energy shield gear. This style of build is definitely not for everyone. If you like to blast and move at 1000% move speed all the time and have a lot of front-loaded damage, you probably won't enjoy this. I personally don't mind the slower, methodical ramping Shock Nova of Death mowing through hordes of enemies in my maps. In conclusion, I think the Queen's Hunger is such a cool item and I love messing around with it. I hope you found this interesting and that it gives you some ideas on how you could build around or incorporate it with other skills. Stay sane and thanks for watching.